Hollywood wants you to believe it's collapsing because a few movies flopped. But let's be honest, the real story isn't about budgets, box office charts, or marketing failures. It's about the people running the machine and what happens when the mask slips. When an 8-figure industry is dragged down not by critics, but by its own ego, its own pettiness, and its own bizarre sense of self-importance. Today, we're not chasing scandals. We're following the tiny cracks that reveal the entire structure. Because Hollywood isn't falling apart by accident. It's falling apart because the people running it finally got caught being themselves. Hollywood isn't failing because of bad movies. It's failing because of oversized egos. Let's start with the myth Hollywood keeps selling. Movies are bombing because audiences don't appreciate art anymore. No. Audiences appreciate art just fine. What they're tired of is arrogance. Take Glenn Powell's remake of Running Man, a film rebooted not because it needed to exist, but because someone assumed the audience would show up out of habit. They didn't. And the box office numbers weren't just bad, they were a message, a loud, unmistakable message. We're not paying for recycled ideas held together by celebrity confidence. Hollywood still believes that a famous face is enough to push a mediocre script over the finish line. But that era is over. People aren't dazzled by marketing anymore. They're not impressed by the same tired formulas dressed in neon lights. And they're definitely not buying tickets out of loyalty. This isn't a creative problem. It's an ego problem. Because behind every failing blockbuster, there's a boardroom full of executives who think the audience will swallow anything. Behind every reboot, remake, or reimagining, there's a belief that nostalgia can replace originality. And behind every flop, there's a quiet truth Hollywood refuses to say out loud. The audience has outgrown the system, but the system hasn't noticed. That's why the collapse feels so dramatic, not because the movie suddenly got worse, but because the people making them refused to change. The small stories that expose the big truth. If you really want to understand why Hollywood is cracking, don't look at the scandals worth millions. Look at the tiny stories, the ones whispered behind closed doors, because those stories are the honest ones. Take Bill Maher, not the television persona, not the political commentator, the man behind the scenes. When HBO paid for his relocation to New York, he had everything covered: rent, fees, convenience, comfort. All he had to do was pay the broker, a basic courtesy, something any decent person would do. He refused, not because he couldn't, not because of some paperwork issue, but because he simply didn't want to, because he could get away with it. And the people around him, they weren't dazzled. They were terrified. His assistant was described as petrified, a word that tells you far more about a workplace than any HR report ever could. It's a small moment, yes, a single transaction, a few $1,000s, but it exposes the culture perfectly. A culture where power is measured not by generosity, but by how cruel you can be without consequences. Hollywood likes to pretend it is built on talent and brilliance, but these tiny stories show the real foundation: insecurity, vanity, entitlement. And here's the bigger truth. Audiences don't know these stories in detail, but they feel the energy behind them. They sense the arrogance. They sense the disconnect. And that sense, that instinct, is why they're walking away. Because sometimes the smallest scandals tell the biggest stories.
Hollywood has become a parody of itself. If the ego problem weren't bad enough, Hollywood has added another layer of chaos. It has become unintentionally funny. Not funny in the brilliant satire way, funny in the do they know how ridiculous they look way? Let's start with Alex Rodriguez, a grown man, a former sports icon, a person with more money than entire neighborhoods. Yet he somehow decided the most logical piece of art to hang on his wall was a painting of himself as a centaur. Half man, half horse, all ego. You couldn't script that. It's the kind of absurdity Hollywood screenwriters would reject for being too unrealistic. And then there's Jack Schlossberg, a man running for Congress who opens his videos with the line, "Ask not," as if borrowing Kennedy's voice could magically borrow Kennedy's legacy. It didn't make him look presidential. It made him look like a TikTok reenactor trapped in a political cosplay. These moments are not isolated. They're symptoms, evidence that the industry's biggest names have lost any sense of self-awareness. Hollywood used to set cultural standards. Now it gets turned into memes by accident. Not because the public is cruel, but because the industry keeps feeding them material no comedy writer could dream up. This is the new problem. When Hollywood tries to be iconic, it ends up looking ironic. And audiences notice. They can forgive a bad movie. They cannot forgive an industry that constantly turns itself into a joke and still expects applause.
Hollywood's downfall is self-inflicted. So after peeling back every layer, the picture becomes painfully clear. Hollywood isn't collapsing because audiences changed. It's collapsing because Hollywood didn't. The industry that once defined global culture now struggles to understand the people it was built to entertain. It ignored their expectations. It dismissed their criticism. And it underestimated their power. What we're seeing today isn't chaos. It's consequences. A system built on ego will always crack under its own weight. A system that treats audiences like afterthoughts will eventually be treated the same way. But there is a silver lining. The vacuum left behind is being filled, not by studios with billion-dollar budgets, but by creators who speak with honesty, who see the world clearly, and who don't hide behind the illusion of perfection. The future of entertainment won't be defined by massive franchises or hollow celebrity brands. It will be shaped by the voices people trust, the stories that feel real, and the creators who refuse to play by the old rules. Hollywood still has time to change, but the audience has already moved on. And the message is simple: respect us, or we'll keep walking. Because in the end, the power was never in Hollywood's hands. It was always in ours.